want to welcome a couple of people here. This is Miss Leanne from the Prescott Public Library, and I don't know if you all have met her yet. She's pretty new in her position up there, but she was kind enough to arrange this today for us to have a program, and we're going to be hearing from Brian. Mr. Brian, I almost had his last name, but I don't quite have it down yet. He came all the way across the state from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, I believe, and he's going to be teaching us a lot about space and NASA. So we're pretty excited about this program, and we'll turn it over to Miss Leanne here to do a little introduction and maybe say a few things about the library program as well.
Hi everyone, thank you for having us here today. I'm so excited to be here. So I want to mention that this summer we'll have our annual summer reading program, and this year's theme is a universe of stories. So we're going to be doing a lot of cool activities that have to do with space and science, and so I really hope you guys can come and sign up. Registration starts June 1st, but since we're here with you today, we're going to let you guys sign up early if you want to. So you can come into the library at any time to sign up. And so what you do with that program is if you read for 20 minutes, you can fill out your reading log, and you can earn free books and enter for raffle prizes. It's going to be a really fun summer, and I really hope you guys will join us for it. So now I'm going to turn it over to my friend Brian over here, and I hope you guys really enjoy his presentation. It's super cool. Thank you guys.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to your school today. As alluded to in the introduction, my name is Mr. Brian. I'm an aerospace educator by trade. That's a big word to say I'm a teacher. But for the past 20 years, my students were a little bit bigger than you guys. I was a teacher to astronauts at NASA's Johnson Space Center down in Houston, Texas. So my dream for you guys today is we have a teacher with an apple on his or her backpack taking 4 kids in the ultimate field trip. We're going to see what it's like to ride a rocket into space, to live, work, eat, sleep, and play in space, as well as how we get back safely. Now, I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and keep those questions towards the end. If your questions are not answered during the presentation and we don't have time because we're also going off to another school a little bit later, your principal will have my email. You can send all of your questions to me, and usually within a couple of days I'll be able to respond to all of those. So my dream of working in the space program actually began at 4 years old. I'm not originally from Wisconsin, nor am I originally from the United States. I am originally from Canada. I was born in Montreal, Quebec, and at 4 years old, my mom and dad took my twin brother and I on a trip all the way down to Florida to the Kennedy Space Center. We were so excited by rocket ships and airplanes. Right then and there, at 4 years old, we told our mom and dad we wanted to work with either airplanes or rocket ships when we grew up. My twin brother is an Air Canada Boeing 767 pilot. He gets to fly all over the world. I wanted to fly a lot higher, go much faster, be on time, and not lose your luggage. So I decided to join the space program. I started with the Canadian Space Agency just south of Montreal, Quebec, when NASA said, how would you like to come to a place where it never snows? We'll pay you in American dollars. We'll help you with your immigration visa. You get to work with your heroes and launch stuff into space. So I moved down to Houston as fast as I could. Down in Houston, I trained the astronauts how to fly the space shuttle, how to use the big robot arm that Canada built for the shuttle and space station. And towards the end of my career, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I was in a department called ECLSS, Environmental Control and Life Support Systems on Spacesuits. There are more S's in that acronym than the word Mississippi. And does anyone know what an acronym is? Is that a big word or a small word? Where they stand for something. So, for example, NFL. What does that mean? National Football League. That is an example of an acronym. Working in the Space Shuttle program, I had to learn 22,000 3- and 4-letter words. So reading is very important to all of your learning, no matter what you're going to do. Now, I was lucky enough to spend 20 years in the Space Shuttle program. Give you a sense of the size of the Space Shuttle. It's the same size as an apartment building with 19 floors. It weighs 4 million pounds. The big orange fuel tank at NASA is what we like to call the world's greatest coffee thermos. 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. Every 25 seconds during our 8.5-minute ride to orbit, we will use the same amount of liquid fuel as that of an Olympic-sized swimming pool every 25 seconds. 2 solid rocket boosters on either side. Solid means hard like the table. Once we turn those on, we cannot turn them off. The astronauts say once the solids ignite, you know you're going somewhere for at least 2 minutes. We're going to get to 26 miles high before those booster rockets separate. Now the orbiter, the part that sort of looks like an airplane, is what we like to call at NASA the world's greatest pickup truck. Carries 7 people and up to 65,000 pounds of stuff in the back. That back, where we carry up everything, is called the payload bay, is the exact same dimension as one of those big yellow school buses you see driving around town. We could put Mrs. Frizzle in the driver's seat, put a whole class in the back, and send the magic school bus to space. So we're going to go on a trip just like they do. Now, does Wisconsin have any astronauts? Absolutely. We have 6 astronauts that have come from the state of Wisconsin that have flown in space. The only one that is still active right now is Colonel Jeffrey Williams from Winter, Wisconsin. Population 325. You don't have to grow up in a big city like Los Angeles or Milwaukee or Chicago to do great things. You can do great things no matter where you grow up. But your end of the bargain is you have to stay in school, study hard, and apply yourselves. Now, Colonel Williams, when he was in space about a year ago, took this photo of the entire state of Wisconsin almost without clouds. When we look right here, this is Lake Winnebago by Oshkosh. This little bump right here is Sheboygan, where I came from. Came all the way across the state. You can see here this squiggly line is the Mississippi River. And right where the St. Croix River is, we're right there at that little apex in that spot. And we can see all the way up to Lake Superior and all the way up to Door County and even Washington Island. Now we have this home in space called the International Space Station. It has been in space for 20 years. 18 of those years, there's been at least 2 people living on board that space station who are no longer citizens of the United States, Canada, Russia, what I like to call citizens of the universe. We have had a continuous human presence for the past 18 years of people living and working in space. Especially the young people here, there has not been a day in your life where there has not been people living in space. And the way we're going in the space program, there may not be a day in your life that we don't have people living in space. Now that space station is the same size as an NFL football field. We could bring that space station to Lambeau Field, we could put it down, and it would go from end zone to end zone. It is so big, we can actually see it cross over Wisconsin 16 times a day. So if you go to a NASA website called Spot the Station, put in Prescott, Wisconsin, USA, it'll tell you exactly what time it's crossing over, where to look in the sky. It is the 3rd brightest object in the sky. You don't even need binoculars or a telescope. You can see it with your eyes. And it is traveling over at 17,500 miles an hour. Is that pretty quick? Absolutely. Imagine we're getting on an airplane in Los Angeles, and when we want to cross the United States and go all the way to New York City. How many hours do you think that would take? About 6 hours. Space shuttle, space station, will go from Los Angeles to New York City in 9 minutes. To do one complete tour of the Earth is an hour and a half. We're traveling so fast, we're going to have a sunrise and a sunset every 45 minutes. So in one day in space, the sun will come up 16 times, it'll go down 16 times. Think you could go to sleep and wake up and go to sleep and wake up every 45 minutes? Pretty tough. So we have big window shades like you might have at home, so your body is not tricked into thinking a day is only 45 minutes long. Now, what I like about the space station is we have people from 16 different countries working together with a common goal. If we can treat each other with respect in space, we should be able to treat each other with the same kind of respect here on Earth. Does anyone know what the language is that we use on board the space station, besides acronyms? Any ideas? American English, absolutely. What else? All the different languages. The language on board the space station is that of the commander for the 3-month increment. So if your commander comes from Japan, the entire crew learns Japanese. Your commander is from Germany, everyone learns German. What's that country? I know it is. Not quite Norway. France is that way. It's in Europe. I want to say Luxembourg. I just drew a blank for some reason. But anyways, the language on board the space station is that of the commander. Learning languages opens the world to you. Growing up in Canada, I've been lucky enough to learn English, French, Spanish, and Italian. And right now I am trying, the key word is trying, to learn Russian. If you think my degree in astrophysics was tough, Russian is kicking my backside. But by learning multiple languages, I've been lucky enough to travel to over 30 different countries on this planet. And you guys one day may even find yourself off of this planet by knowing different languages. Do we want to practice saying hello in some of the languages from the International Space Station? Yeah. Awesome. So let's start with a fairly tough one. This here is Japanese. Konnichiwa. Spanish. Hola. German. Hello. French. Salut. And Russian. Privet. Awesome. You guys are going to be world travelers when you grow up. So right now we actually have 6 people living on board the International Space Station. They launched in December. They actually come from Canada, the United States, Russia, and the US as well. They will be up there until early June, and then they'll be replaced by another crew. So while the space station is in space, the actual deal right now is we're going to use that space station through about the year 2024, maybe even 2028. So we actually have some private companies that are building taxis to get our astronauts up into space so that NASA can actually go and explore further out. We are not going to Mars until at least the year 2037, 2038. We've got a lot of things to figure out how to get to Mars. So what we're going to do after the space station is we're actually going to build a space station around the moon, and we're going to build a base on the moon so that astronauts can learn how to work on another planetary body. So that vehicle, that space station, called the Lunar Gateway, we're expecting to go back to the moon in 2024. That's only 5 some odd years from now. And from there, we're going to learn how to work on a different planetary body, and eventually we will send people all the way to Mars. So to build that space station, it took a lot of heavy lifting power. Rockets from many different countries bringing up 143 pieces into space. Those pieces have never touched each other on the ground. We have to put them together in space like a big Lego set. but some of those actual pieces, the tolerances between them, up and down, right and left, in and out, is no greater than and no less than 1/1600th of an inch. That is about the width of a human hair. We do our homework too far, not far enough, the width of a human hair, potentially all of the air goes out of the space station and 6 people die in less than a minute. So this is a business where we have to be almost perfect in our homework every single time. Now you may have noticed that the space station modules are sort of round, just like this coffee tin. If I was going to build a space station, I would probably build mine to be a rectangle, just like a school bus. A lot more volume. So why do you think we actually build it round on the end rather than square? Aerodynamics. Aerodynamics, absolutely. Is there any air in space? No, we can send any shape we want into space. So it's not quite aerodynamics. Any other ideas? Strength. The vehicle is actually pressurized from the inside out, just like a balloon. So what is air trying to do in this gymnasium right now? Escape, find somewhere to leave. So if we actually had a square profile, that vehicle would start to bend on the edges, just like a balloon with the air trying to escape. And eventually those corners would rip and all of the air goes out of the space station. So by having it as a circle, we have the same temperature and pressure over the circumference and the diameter. And just like a balloon, as this young man said, that strength is going to keep it nice and tight like a balloon by the air trying to push on the edges. So let's show you what that's like by comparing it to a soda can.
You've been asked to design your next home in space, and you don't quite know where to start. Well, remember that your home in space needs to be pressurized like this soda can. And the most efficient shapes to hold in pressure are spheres, cones, and cylinders, which all have circular cross-sections. Gas pressure pushes evenly in all directions. In a circle, those outward forces all wind up pulling the structure along its circumference, making it act like a hoop or belt. If you tried to make space living quarters out of a box, those forces would try to bend out the flat sides and corners, ripping the box apart. To hold the same pressure and volume as a can, the box would need to have much more material in the walls, making it quite a bit heavier. And heavier things cost more to launch into space. Back on Earth, your soda is in a can too. But what about boxed milk or juice? These products are not under additional pressure, and putting them in boxes allows more to be packed in the same space on the truck. More design tips for your home in space are at nasa.gov.
So living in space, being up there for 6 months at a time, even sometimes a year in space, we actually don't have enough room on a rocket to bring up all the food and clothes and stuff necessary to keep 6 people alive for 6 months to a year. So just like UPS or FedEx, we have a whole bunch of delivery trucks. 4 of them are actually not reusable, so they bring everything up, but then they have a secondary purpose as they actually become our garbage truck. We put our dirty clothes, our food, and garbage bits into there, and these 4 vehicles will actually burn up coming back through the atmosphere. Now this one here, Dragon, is actually reusable. We use it to do what's called up mass, bringing stuff up, and down mass if something needs to be brought back and fixed and then relaunched. Now here's a help wanted ad for astronauts. If we were to open up the local newspaper, we want both boys and girls to become astronauts. We want you to study science, technology, engineering, and math in school. Once you become an astronaut, you're going to move to lovely Houston, Texas, where you're going to go back to school for at least 2 years to learn everything you need to know to fly in space. Once you're actually selected for a mission, it's another 5 years of going to school to learn about all of the parts from the different countries. So for those 5 years, you're going to go to school in Canada, Europe, Russia, and Japan to learn about their parts of the space station. So from the day you become an astronaut, you have to go back to school for 7 years before you may get the chance to fly in space once or twice in a 15 to 20 year career. Now, your job does require you to sit on top of 4 million pounds of explosives. You'll be blasted into space going from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. You'll remain in space for days to weeks and possibly months to years. So this is the first time I ask, anyone want to be an astronaut? All right, we got a couple of hands up. We'll ask a couple of times during the presentation. Once we get to space, your heart is going to get smaller by 8 to 10% of its size. You're going to lose up to 19% of your bone density, advanced osteoporosis within 6 months of being in space, 25% muscle mass loss. You're going to be like Jell-O. Your kidneys are going to start to stop functioning. You'll have an inability to control your blood pressure. Mind you, sitting on top of a 4 million pound bomb, we give you a pass on that. And astronauts, just like flight attendants and commercial airline pilots, have about a 2.5% higher rate of cancer than the general population. So that leads to two questions. Personally, why would anyone be crazy enough to do this? And two, why do great nations explore? Now, to get to the space station, we actually use a Russian rocket called the Soyuz. Right now, that Soyuz is known as the taxi. Its job is to get us from Earth to our home in space, end of the mission, home in space, back down to Earth. The actual living quarters on that vehicle is about the same size as the back seats in a Volkswagen Beetle. So we're going to take 3 astronauts. We're going to get you into your so-called launch and entry suit. We're going to get you squished down into your seat, elbows to your knees, knees to your elbow, and you're going to sit this way for the next 2 to 3 days. Not hours, days. So as we said a moment ago, 3 seats, 1, 2, 3. Squish down on your back, knees to your chest, elbows to your knees. And this is what it looks like after we put your suitcases in and we get ready to close the door. Elbow to elbow, knee to knee with your friends, can't get out of your seat. The vehicle is so small we don't actually have a bathroom on board. So the first thing you're going to put on before you put your spacesuit on is your adult diaper. During launch, landing, and spacewalks, we wear diapers under our spacesuit. This will bring your ego down 2 or 3 levels to say you're ready to ride a rocket into space. But this is not actually a diaper. This is one of our 22,000 approved NASA acronyms. This is a DACT, a Disposable Absorption Containment Trunk. That's your government bureaucracy at work. Once we get to space, we actually have a $10 million waterless toilet, which we'll explain in intimate detail after we get into space. Now, once we get to space, we're going to be there for 6 months to a year. You're only allowed 1 suitcase per person with 10 pounds of stuff. No Walmart in space, no Target in space. You have to figure out what you're going to bring with you. Now, would you actually bring your favorite stuffed animal?
No.
Do astronauts have stuffed animals?
Yes.
Absolutely. You're going to be far away from mom, dad, family, friends, and it might even be a little bit scary up there. I'm going to bring my safety bear. The astronauts will bring up their sons and daughters' stuffed animals with them so they feel safe in an environment that may be a little bit scary. The last crew brought up a nice plush toy called Earth. It was floating in the windows, looking back to home. In the morning, gotta have your coffee. So here we are at breakfast, having our Hawaiian Kona coffee. And even one night at dinner, we even had an alien show up for dinner. So the astronauts, being in a place that might be a little bit scary, are going to bring stuff that reminds them of home. Because the one thing with the space station is we're actually living and working in space. We are up there for 6 months to a year at a time. Astronauts, just like you guys going to school, work Monday to Friday, and we have weekends off. But it's not like we can get in the Soyuz and go over to Door County for the weekend. So we have to figure out what to do while we're living in a tin can. Astronauts will bring their guitars with them. They'll float in the window and play music as they go around the world every 90 minutes. Some will bring up books and journals. They'll write about their experiences. They'll even play games like chess and checkers, where they're actually playing with the ground. Because everything sort of floats, we have to have magnets and Velcro on the bottom of those things. And we also create new games. Not that baseball or basketball is a new game, but imagine if this gym was in space and the Bucks could play off the ceiling, they could play off the wall, they could score from under the net, over the net, many different ways. Maybe they would have won last night if they were doing it that way, but we're going to beat those Raptors hopefully on Saturday to force a Game 7, right? Awesome. So we create new things that are impossible to do in space. Now, we're going to do a little bit of a geography quiz. Can we actually see roads, buildings, bridges, schools from space? No. Absolutely. With about a 1,000-millimeter lens, we can make out individual bridges, roads. So let's take a look at a couple of photos here. This here is an area of the world where there's a big desert, a very fertile river valley, a river running north and south, and a very ancient city right here. Where do you think this might be? Mesopotamia? That's pretty close, absolutely. Egypt. What makes you think it's Egypt? The Nile River, the desert. If you take a look at those triangles right there in the center of the photo, that's the Great Pyramids of Giza visible from space. This here is a part of the world where there is a big peninsula, has a space center on its east coast. Right here, that big gray area is a city where there are castles. Some of the inhabitants have big black ears. Florida from space. So we can see about 1,500 miles from space in one shot. This here's Lake Okeechobee, Kennedy Space Center, city of Orlando. As we go up the east coast, we can go to Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, all the way up to the Chesapeake Bay and the nation's capital, which is Washington, D.C. Heading westward, we can go through Pensacola, Mobile Bay in Alabama, all the way to New Orleans. Now, this here is an eastern city. It has lots of waterways, a big port. As you come in on the highways, there's a big baseball stadium, county fairgrounds, where are we here? Coming down the waterway. A big art museum where it's shaped almost like a sailing ship. Milwaukee from space. Now, how do we tell time in space? We're going around the world every 90 minutes. Imagine having to reset your watch as you go through every time zone in the world about every 3 to 5 minutes.
And are special watches, like expensive watches?
Special watches, not sure if they're expensive, but Omega has created a special watch for us called MET, Mission Elapsed Time. Before launch, we have that exciting countdown, 3, 2, 1, 0, liftoff. Then it starts counting up, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this watch here actually has days. So this is day 100 in space, 23 hours, 55 minutes, 44 seconds. This astronaut wants to set his or her watch to wake up tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. They're going to set their alarm for day 101, 8 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. So it's actually a count up clock from the minute you launch in days, hours, minutes, and seconds. Once we get into space, living on board that vehicle, everything sort of floats. So we actually have limited space. We have to use every little bit of space as working space. Very tough to tell what is the ceiling, what is the floor, what is the wall. We have to use every bit of space as working space. Now, you guys look like a pretty smart group this morning. With your hands, can you show me which way is up in this room right now? Awesome. Down? To the right? Other right, there we go. Left. Which way's up in this photo? This way? It's pretty tough to figure out. If we take a look between the astronauts' heads, we have an exit sign just like you find right here over the gymnasium door. That would indicate the astronauts are in the ceiling. But if you've been lucky enough to get out on the Mississippi or the St. Croix River on a boat, these big words right here, starboard is to the right, port is to the left, so the astronauts are actually in the floor in this picture. Very confusing. Two parts of our body help us to know what's up, down, right, and left. In our inner ear, we have a series of tubes with fluid in them. Because of that magical power called gravity, that fluid's always going between our toes to the center of the earth. Doesn't matter if we're doing gymnastics, we're playing basketball, fluid moves with us, tells our brain this is down. But in space, it's floating around the inside of our ears. So then we're going to use our eyes to help us out. Do our eyes ever play tricks on us?
Yeah.
Sometimes. Here we have this beautiful princess with her crown and her nice long locks of hair. But I'm not too sure I see a princess. I see an old lady ready to go to IHOP for Sunday brunch. Does anyone not see it? All right, hang on a sec. What we'll do, if we take a look at the princess's crown, that will become the old lady's neck. Her bangs will become the nose and chin of the old lady. And her lips will become the wrinkles on the forehead. Pretty crazy. So about 85% of astronauts are going to get sick in the first 2 to 3 days of space flight. Take out your handy dandy astronaut barf bag and you throw up in the bag. But everything appears to float. Huge problem called splashback. When it hits the bottom of the bag, everything's going to come back towards your face. It's got to close the bag before you get a face full of the bad stuff. As well, if we imagine these sponges are our spine, the bones in our back, once we get to space, they're going to start to float and separate. After about 12 hours in space flight, you will get taller by as much as 3 inches. You want to play basketball for the U.S. Olympic team in Tokyo in the Olympics next summer, the place to go is space. As well, if we imagine this water balloon is everything inside of us, once we get to space, everything's going to go upwards. Your face, your neck, and your chest are going to get bigger, and your legs will become super skinny. We call that puffy face and chicken legs. And it's very, very noticeable. This here is Kent Rominger, former chief of the Astronaut Corps, F-14 fighter pilot in the Navy. Here's his NASA class picture. Look at him in space. His face is red. It's round like Charlie Brown. His neck is distended, and his cheeks are puffed out like a chipmunk. With all that fluid shift coming upwards, your nose gets stuffed up like having a cold. What does your food taste like when you have a cold? Nothing. So we lose our sense of taste. Now, do astronauts go to the local grocery store to get their food?
No.
Or do they go to some laboratory where they mix everything together? Who thinks grocery store? Who thinks laboratory? We go to the same grocery stores you guys do, but specially prepare your food for space flight. Nothing like thermostabilized, irradiated, and freeze-dried chicken, and this one's chicken, sweet and sour chicken. Good for 7 years in the package without going into a fridge. We cannot use a microwave in space. It interferes with our computers and electronics. We can't use a regular convection oven. No convection. Heat's not going to rise and cook food evenly. So just like on a cold day here in Wisconsin, in the middle of the winter, if you were to be having, say, Quaker oatmeal Your mom or dad opens the package, puts it into the bowl, then they pour hot water into it and stir it up. Same idea. We actually have a septum and where we put a needle in, insert 100 milliliters of hot water into the package, let it float for 3 to 5 minutes, soaks up the water, and you have a meal. We can't bring a big kitchen table into space because everything sort of floats. So your kitchen table is a piece of aircraft grade aluminum where everything is attached by either Velcro or magnets. Once your food is ready, undo your Velcro strips and simply attach your kitchen table to your leg. Then you can just float around and eat any way you want. Upside down, right side up, doesn't matter. For drinks in space, our drinks, the bag is the same technology as that of a Capri Sun juice bag. It is a Mylar bag, but even hot drinks like tea with sugar, we actually have to use a straw. Can't use a regular McDonald's straw because everything's going to come floating out. So this is an astronaut sippy cup. We have a lock on our straw. Undo the lock when you want a drink. When you don't want the drink to come out, close the lock, everything stays inside. We also do not want to use regular bread in space. Bread creates crumbs. We don't want stuff floating around, getting in your eyes, your ears, your nose, or throat. So all of our sandwiches, hot dogs, hamburgers, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, we use a Hispanic flatbread known as tortillas for all of our sandwiches. Long shelf life and no crumbs. Now, food behaves a little bit differently in space. Do you guys play with your food? Do you get in trouble for playing with your food? Probably should. Far away from mom, dad, family, friends, everything sort of floats. What are you going to do? Play with your food. The astronauts will take their drinks right out of the straw, floating around like a tennis ball, and then they'll just drink their drink right out of the air. They get their friend at the other side of the space station, and they'll just float the M&Ms across the room, and they'll catch it off the wall, eat it that way. Can we use regular salt and pepper in space?
No.
Nope, just going to bounce off of things. So we actually have liquid salt and liquid pepper, and we squeeze it out of an eyedropper into each spoonful of food to taste. So everything is a little bit different in space. Can we have a bad hair day in space? You have long hair, it's going to be out like this like snakes. You have a long necklace or a cord on a hoodie, it'll be tickling your chin the whole time you're there. You can't have a bath, water's not going to stay in the tub. Can't have a shower, water's not going to fall down towards you. So for a shower in space, just like if you're camping or in the hospital, we have a no-rinse waterless shampoo. You can actually get this at CVS or Walgreens. It even has the shuttle on the back to show we use it in space. Simply get it on your hands, get your hair nice and clean, comb it or brush it, and it evaporates after about 3 to 5 minutes. For a bath in space, Pampers not only supplies us with our diapers, they supply us with our baby wipes. Imagine 6 months to a year without a bath or shower. What are you going to want when you come home?
A bath.
A nice bath or a hot shower. Now, same with cutting your hair in space. We don't want little bits of hair floating around, getting in your eyes, ears, nose, or throat. So we actually attach the clippers to a vacuum cleaner. For brushing your teeth in space, we don't have a sink. We don't want you to just spit the stuff out and end up all over your friend's face. So I have a special toothpaste that's not bad for your tummy. Get it on your toothbrush, get your teeth nice and clean, then you swallow it and get on with the rest of your day. Do not try that at home with non-astronaut toothpaste because you will have a sore tummy. For sleeping in space, we actually have a light sleeping bag. You can get into your sleeping bag, zip yourself up, and then simply attach yourself to the wall, ceiling, or floor. You can sleep standing up. You can sleep sideways, even upside down. Astronauts' most popular way of sleeping: get into your sleeping bag, close your eyes, and just sleep floating around the cabin all night. No tossing and turning, no fighting with your pillow. If you feel you need a pillow, we have a standard government-issued travel pillow. But the big problem is once you get all tired and sleepy, what's going to happen to your pillow? It's going to float away from you. And if you're a light sleeper, it's probably going to wake you up. So NASA's high-tech solution, rubber band and Velcro, attach your pillow to your head and go to sleep. If it is not dark enough for you inside the spacecraft, a very fashionable eye cover as well. They think of everything. Now, this morning you guys were excited to come to school, opened up your dresser drawer, socks, t-shirt, underwear, everything stays where it is. Open your drawer in space, everything's floating around. Having your underwear floating around on national TV is not cool. You need to make sure you put that stuff away. Now, in training the astronauts, I've been lucky enough to do a spacewalk on the world's largest, deepest swimming pool, the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. I've also been on a special airplane called the KC-135, basically a military tanker, where we do parabolas through the sky for weightless training. NASA calls it the Weightless Wonder. Those of us that fly on it, it's affectionately known as the Vomit Comet. You are going to lose your Cheerios. And I also have a 3-hour training certificate from the Astronaut Potty Training Facility at Building 30 of the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Similar to Earth, we hop up and onto the toilet. After that, everything changes. 2-foot loops that sort of look like slippers that your feet go into. 2 padded bars that come across your legs to push you down towards the seat. The third part of the process, you're going to turn on the TV beside the toilet. Why would we have a TV beside the toilet? So you don't get bored. That's one idea. What else? You're watching TV, but what are you watching? Not the Super Bowl. What do you think?
I'm not ready.
Oh, okay. Yes, you are monitoring something. Here on Earth, because of gravity, the waste falls away from our body. In space, everything floats, including the waste from our body. So there's actually a camera in the bottom of the toilet looking straight up at you in a way you've never seen yourself before. You're not actually touching the seat, so you have to line up with the camera, the TV, to get over the toilet and make sure it gets into the toilet without missing. There are astronauts that have missed. 2 rubber gloves, a Ziploc bag, and you have to chase the stuff down. Not cool. If the toilet does not work, very expensive, long-distance call for a plumber. We're not going to end a $500 million space mission because the toilet doesn't work. So until a resupply ship comes up with spare parts for the toilet, an industrial-strength Ziploc bag, we spray some chemicals into the bag, 2 pieces of double-sided tape, tape to one cheek, tape to the other, and you go to the bathroom in a Ziploc bag. So you've survived riding a bomb into space, your body's bloated, you're throwing up, your food tastes like cardboard, you haven't had a bath or shower in 6 months, and you've missed the toilet. Still think these are heroes? Absolutely. It takes a special kind of person to want to live and work there. Now, as we said earlier, we go to space to do things that are impossible to do here on Earth. For example, 3-dimensional games, even playing basketball off the ceiling, scoring from underneath, over the top. In microgravity, we are doing things that are impossible to do here on Earth. For example, this here is what a birthday candle looks like on Earth. Due to convection, the heat rises. We have the different temperatures and pressures represented by the colors. This is what your birthday candle looks like in space. It is a perfect circle over the wick, exact same temperature and pressure over the entire flame. Very pretty, but it also makes an engine work very inefficiently and makes it nearly impossible to fight a fire in space. If you have a water fire extinguisher, the water comes out in little droplets, and it's going to bounce off of the flame and not smother it. A chemical fire extinguisher, that chemical is heavier than air. We spray it here, gravity is going to bring it down, it'll get rid of the oxygen and get rid of the fire. In space, it weighs the same as the environment, so that chemical is just going to disperse and the fire won't go out. So the two craziest, most dangerous things we could have in space are a fire or an oxygen leak. And both on 99% of the time will be fatal, meaning you're going to die. So we have to figure out how to solve the problem if we have a fire on board a space station. Now, one of the actual experiments I sent into space was human cancer cells. Here on Earth, because of gravity, if they're in a beaker, they'll actually fall over 5 hours to the bottom of the beaker and form a line. We can do pretty easy studying of those cells. But in space, they will actually coalesce to the center of the beaker and form their perfect natural shape. We are now doing three-dimensional imaging in space of cancer cells to the point where eventually we'll have medication that targets only the cancer cell and marks it. And unlike radiation and chemotherapy that destroys healthy cells, we are using space technology to hopefully eventually kill cancer and keep the rest of the body safe. And that's something we are doing in space that is impossible to do here on Earth. Going out on a spacewalk is probably one of the most incredible things you get to do while being in space. Just like being here in the middle of winter time, our spacesuit is sort of like a winter coat. We need 11 different layers of material to keep us alive in space. There's a hard outer rubberized shell, multiple layers of mylar interspersed with Kevlar that's used in bulletproof vests, then a couple of big words: neoprene, latex, Gore-Tex, and nylon tricot. Now, the nylon tricot with the tubes in it is the part that is actually closest to our body. And at NASA, we call that astronaut underwear, long johns, t-shirt and pants in one piece. You're out on a spacewalk, you're working hard, you're a little bit warm, maybe even sweaty. You turn a big dial on the front of the spacesuit to the right, and cool water runs through your t-shirt and pants to cool you down. You're on the dark side of the spacewalk, very cold, turn the dial the opposite way, and warm water runs through your t-shirt and pants to warm you up. So it's a heating and cooling system to help regulate your body temperature. Anyone get a new pair of pants or uniform at the beginning of the school year? Awesome. Any of your parents you a $3 million pair of pants? No. What does a $3 million pair of pants look like? This here is a $3 million pair of pants. The entire spacesuit is $10 million to keep you alive in an environment where there's no air, it's both hot and cold, and there's extensive radiation. So the spacesuit serves as a mini spaceship to keep you alive in that environment. Now, going out on a spacewalk, we're going to wear two different kinds of gloves. Our first glove is sort of like a garden glove if you're helping mom and dad plant plants. It has all these cords that sort of look like shoelaces. It serves the same purpose. You want to have a tight fit, pull down on your shoelace and tie it off. You want to have a little bit of room to play in the edge of the glove, loosen it, and then tie it where you have the best grip. After that, a big, heavy work glove. Tear resistant. Last thing you want to hear on a spacewalk is psst. You have an air leak in your spacesuit, your blood will boil, and you will die in less than a minute. So very important that it doesn't rip or tear. Now, while we're out there, everything sort of floats. So we're going to attach the astronauts to the space station with a cord called a tether. We're also going to attach all your tools to you with a tether, a system much more robust than this one, so that your tool, if you're working on it and say you're coming over the coast of California and Mission Control says you are less than 3 minutes and you'll be crossing over Wisconsin, you're going to leave your tool floating around, you're going to un-Velcro your camera, you're going to take a picture of home, then your boss is going to say get back to work, put your Nikon back there, grab your tool, and you're ready to go back to work. It's done in a way that it'll never be out of arm's length. Now we've seen what it's like to go to space. We're going to see a little bit of what it's like to come home. And we'll go into a series of 2 videos here.
Welcome aboard the Soyuz MS spacecraft with non-stop service to Kazakhstan. Our flight time will be just under 3 hours 30 minutes. We'll be descending from an altitude of over 1,300,000 feet. At the time of departure, we're flying at a ground speed of 17,500 miles per hour. Please make sure all carry-on items are secured and that your seatbelt is correctly fastened. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now entering the upper levels of Earth's atmosphere. The estimated temperature outside is over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. During this zone of turbulence, we recommend you keep your seatbelt fastened while you're seated. As we start our final descent, our speed is down to 24 feet per second. At 1 second before touchdown, engines on the bottom of the vehicle will fire to soften the landing. On behalf of the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for flying with us. Welcome to Kazakhstan.
Because Russia doesn't have a lot of open water like we do, the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean that's not covered by ice, we actually land by parachute in the middle of a farmer's field in Kazakhstan. So imagine your bones are weak, your muscles are weak, your vestibular system's messed up, you're a little bit dizzy, and you're actually going to hit the ground still at about 35 miles an hour. It is a small car crash. Twice the engines have failed, the radar failed to tell the astronauts that they were about to hit the ground, and they ended up not bracing, broken vertebra, broken teeth, and a broken wrist. So it's a very, very tough thing to do. We're going to end off here with a video called Coming Home that shows you that even though astronauts love being in space, you're going to want to come back and tell your family and friends about it, and then we can open the floor to questions as well.
Bye.
From the sun, people get ready, 'cause here it comes, it's a light, a beautiful light, over the horizon, into her eyes, oh my, how beautiful, oh my beautiful mother, she told me, son, in life you're gonna go far, if you do it right, you'll love where you are, just know, wherever you go, you can always come home. 240,000 miles from the moon, we've come a long way to belong here, to share this view of the night, a glorious night. Over the horizon there's another bright sky. Oh my, how beautiful. Oh my, every beautiful father told me, son, sometimes it may seem dark, but the absence of the light is a necessary part. Just know you're never alone. You can always come back home. You can always come back. slippery slope. There is always a hand that you can hold on to. Looking deeper through the telescope, you can see that your home's inside of you. Just know that wherever you go, no, you're never really alone. You will always get back
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for getting me home.
Over the horizon into our eyes.
That's a little bit of what it's like to live, work, eat, sleep, play in space. At this point, we can take any questions that you may have.
I was thinking of why couldn't you just use another layer for the walkway? So if it got ripped, there would still be another layer.
Question is, or comment is, why don't we just wear one glove with an extra layer to keep us all comfortable? Because the environment is so extreme, we're going to wear 2 or 3 different gloves so that if one fails, then the next one does its job. If the second one fails, then we're down to the last glove. So we wear 2 or 3. Same with the layers. We have 11 layers so that if 1 or 2 layers fail, it doesn't get to the point that the entire suit fails, because that would be a bad day.
Why don't they drink
Why don't they drink
more milk?
Why don't they drink more milk in space? Well, actually, the interesting thing is your bones here on Earth have holes in them. That gives them flexibility and pliability. I'm not actually getting a stress fracture every time I move. This is what your bones look like after 6 months in space. Advanced osteoporosis. Because the astronauts are actually leaching, basically urinating or peeing out tons of calcium, if we cannot give them milk to actually densify the bones, because the astronauts have a much higher tendency towards getting kidney stones in space. Kidney stones are not fun to pass on Earth. Passing them in space is definitely not fun. So we don't use milk in space because it's going to have more negative effects than actual positive effects. All right, we'll come back to this side in a moment. Over here.
How much do they get paid?
Excellent question. How much do astronauts get paid? Anyone here know who LeBron James is? Awesome. Who is LeBron James? What's he do? Basketball player. How much does he make a year playing basketball? $84 million a year to play a sport. Now, if people are willing to give them that, hey, this is America. That's great. Your lowest paid astronaut is $43,000 a year. Highest paid astronaut is $110,000 a year. We're not doing this for fame. We're certainly not doing it for fortune. Imagine risking your life and your family's life for a mere $65,000, $66,000 a year. We are doing it because we believe we're helping to make Earth a much better place. And the glasses back here.
Shows the astronaut suit weigh on Earth?
The actual full suit here on Earth is about 395 pounds. How much does it weigh in space? 0. Instant weight loss program. It's a great deal.
How old do you have to be to become an astronaut?
Excellent question. How old do you have to become an astronaut? Most astronauts astronauts have anywhere between 3 and 6 university degrees. So that's basically about 20, 25 years of being in school before you get to fly in space. The youngest astronaut ever was 28. The oldest, my former boss, former U.S. Senator and astronaut John Glenn, made his second flight at 77 years old. So we've gone from 28 to 77.
What's the worst thing that could possibly happen on space? What's the worst thing that could possibly happen on space?
The worst possible thing that could happen on a spaceship is an oxygen leak. Your blood will boil and you will die in less than a minute. And the other one is definitely a fire on board, because it's almost impossible to put a fire out. Fire is extremely dangerous. In the space program in the United States, we have had 3 accidents in the space program where 17 astronauts gave their lives in service to the nation. On January 27th of 1967, the Apollo 1 crew was in a practice countdown in their spacecraft, had fully pressurized 100% pure oxygen, and they actually had a chain wire that created a spark. Those 3 astronauts died in a fire on the launch pad. On January 28th of 1986, Space Shuttle Challenger was on its way to space. One of those big solid rocket boosters failed, and 7 astronauts lost their lives, including the first teacher going to space, Krista McAuliffe. I'm staying over in Hastings, and I just realized this morning there's actually a Krista McAuliffe school over there, so I may go do a little visit. But very near and dear to me, too, was the crew of Space Shuttle Columbia's final flight. I had actually trained that crew. I was with them for 5 years. I was at the launch with their families when we launched into space. About 70 seconds into launch, we had a big piece of the external fuel tank come off and puncture a hole in the left wing of the vehicle. I was actually on the floor of Mission Control in Houston, bringing our friends home. 16 minutes before touchdown in Florida, the superheated gases got into the wing. The wing actually broke up, as did the spacecraft, and it crashed in East Texas and Louisiana, killing 7 colleagues and good friends. So definitely for me, the toughest day in my job was losing 7 good friends. Now, getting on board a spacecraft will never ever be like getting on an airplane, say at Minneapolis, St. Paul, and flying to LAX. The space shuttle, we had 2.5 million movable parts. Our expected reliability was 99%, meaning we still have 2,500 systems failures in a successful flight. I will come back to this side for a little bit. Yes?
How much parts is it to build it?
How many parts to build it? Well, the space shuttle alone had 2.5 million movable parts. Then you get all the other pieces that don't move. There's probably about 3.5 million parts on board a spacecraft. So it's a huge Lego kit that we have to put together. Does have a question?
Has anybody gotten kind of lost in space?
Question is, has anyone ever gotten lost in space? We actually have GPS and we have star trackers, but like the group I would ask this exact same question yesterday, is we had one astronaut that we would say was sort of lost in space, a Russian cosmonaut when it was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in 1986, had launched into space. He was in space for almost a month. During the time he was in space, he was a USSR astronaut. His country had a coup, and it went back to the old name of Russia. So he was in space, no longer had a country. Mission Control didn't talk to him for almost 3 weeks, a month. The United States actually was going to send up a space shuttle to rescue him if they weren't going to bring him back home. But when he came back almost a month later, he was known as the Rip Van Winkle astronaut because he was an astronaut that launched from one country, and when he landed, when his country had a military coup, he no longer was a member of the country that he launched into space. So sort of lost in space.
If somebody gets sick in space, how do you contain it?
That nice little bag. You just got to make sure you close it before it all comes right back into your face.
wires broke once we were working,
And on a spacewalk? Question is, what happens if your cord attaching you to the spaceship breaks? In the old days, the space shuttle was sort of like a pickup truck. We could just fly the shuttle on over and scoop you up in the payload bay. But the space station is the size of what? A football field. There's no way, if you became disattached, that we could actually rescue you. So you're going to be floating off into space. So NASA decided to put a special jet backpack on the back of the spacesuit called SAFER. So if the astronaut becomes disattached, they hit this button on their hip, and these two arms come out just like a sofa chair, and you have a controller like a video game, and that jet backpack like Buck Rogers, you go psh, psh, fly yourself back to the space station, and then reattach to get back inside. Excellent question.
Your body has so many problems because you're in space for this period of time. How are they ever going to solve that problem if you're talking going to Mars for, let's say, 1 to 2 years?
Oh, actually, the question is, with all of those effects on your body, how are we going to solve those problems? So Mars mission is 6 to 9 months to get to Mars. We have to stay there for 1.5 to 2 years while it flies through space and gets close to Earth again, and another 6 to 9 month trip home. Right now, if we were to send astronauts to space, to Mars, it is guaranteed it is a one-way trip. You are not coming back alive. So imagine you arrive there, your vestibular system's messed up, your bones are weak, your muscles are weak. You're going to put on a 395-pound spacesuit, plus you have, say, you're 200 pounds. That's 500 pounds of you in spacesuit that's going to walk down the ladder. First astronaut to walk on Mars right now would probably fall down the ladder. They're going to break their hips or their shin bone, and 911 is 2 years away from rescuing you. Space station, we go to space to use the microgravity environment to our advantage. For a Mars mission, we will probably spin the spacecraft to create a minimal artificial gravity so that we have load bearing on the bones and muscles. But Mars also has 5 times the amount of radiation as here on Earth. So we have to cover all the spacecraft with dirt and rock from the local area. Otherwise, within a year, those astronauts will be dead from cancer. So a lot of people are like, how come we're going back to the moon? We're not going to Mars. The limiting factor right now is the human body. We have the technology, but right now we can't send people to Mars and bring them back alive. All right, got a couple more minutes.
What would happen if, well, this probably wouldn't ever happen, but what would happen if there was a baby, if you took a baby into space?
You took a baby into space.
And they stayed with you for a couple days or weeks.
The big problem in space is while you're actually developing, there's a lot of problems with different kinds of cancer because of latent radiation. Babies, your bones are not fully fused and stuff of that sort, so it would not be very good for a baby to be in space. That would probably cause them a lot of damage. Generally, you have to be pretty close to a grown-up, yes.
Like a teenager or something?
Well, to get all the knowledge, the youngest astronaut to date has been 28, so a little bit older than a teenager.
Have you ever went to space?
Question is, have I ever been to space? Let me answer this 2 ways. Have you been to space?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
This past hour and 15 minutes, we have gone over 100,000 miles through space on this spaceship called Planet Earth. So we're all in space. As an astronaut teacher, I'm just like your teachers. Your teachers teach you neat stuff, then you get to go and do it. The one astronaut selection process that I applied for, 36,000 people applied for 4 positions, but getting to actually work with my heroes and not go into space to date has just been an incredible blessing. Don't get me wrong, if I was given the chance to go, my bags are packed and I'd go in 30 seconds. But the astronauts are allowed to carry 20 personal items into space. They might carry their mom's earrings or their dad's watch as a way of saying thank you for helping them to achieve their dreams. So being a teacher to the astronauts, they've allowed me the opportunity on 5 occasions to launch something into space. My university graduation ring has flown on 5 space shuttle missions, 60 million miles in space as a way of saying thank you for being their teacher. So I like to say a part of me has gone to space. So we've got about maybe a minute or so left. So what we'll do, guys, someone who has not asked a question yet, and the other thing, as we said at the beginning, if your questions are not answered today, I'm going to leave your principal with my business card. You can send me all your questions and I can get back to you in a couple of days. So we'll go 3 questions. Gentleman right here in green.
What happens if you sneeze? What happens if you sneeze?
What happens if you sneeze in space? Well, if you sneeze, all that stuff comes out of your nose at 100 miles an hour. That's actually going to propel you in the opposite way. Same if you pass gas, same as an engine rocket works. That goes that way, you'll be pushed the opposite way. All right. You have not asked the question right yet. No, young lady back. Excellent. Do the astronauts have different positions on the spacecraft? On the space shuttle, we had the commander, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, and then mission specialists. On the space station, we have the commander, the flight engineer, and the science officer. So they have slightly different positions. Is there anyone here on this side who has not asked a question yet?
Can you play baseball in space?
Can you play baseball in space? We play baseball, we play basketball, we do lots of games, but we play it just a little bit differently. So baseball, it's very hard to run to the bases, and because there's no air friction, you're always going to hit it over the wall, automatic home run. So we have to have a big wall there where it'll go, and then you have to push off the wall, get to first base, push off that wall, get to second base, third base. So a little bit different. So thank you so much for your attention, guys. Hopefully you learned